What's driving volatility in transportation capacity? Well, joining us today to speak about that, Kyle Jepson, Senior Vice President of Product at Emerge. Kyle, it's good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Russell.
Kyle, let's just get right to it. From a high level then, what would you say is driving the volatility, this disruption in what's going on in transportation capacity? What do you say? Walk us through that.
There are two sides. You've got supply and demand. On the demand side, changing consumer behaviors. On the supply side, we've had 100,000 new entrants to the transportation market, asset-based trucking companies in the last year. It's almost double what we've seen in the past. Really, a lot of that volatility is just transitioning from larger asset carriers to the smaller companies, and it's driving a complete influx in the spot market. So contract market is much less affected, but we're definitely seeing a lot of volatility due to the massive influx of drivers and freed up supply.
Nevertheless, we have widespread inefficiencies. We're seeing that. We have quite a number of empty miles in the domestic transportation network. So what's that all about? Walk us through it.
It's a lack of connectivity. Systems don't talk to each other, companies don't talk to each other, and that's really what's driving a lot of this inefficiency in our market today. One of the biggest contributors to that is the private fleets and dedicated fleets. It's largely driven by just the lack of flexibility. So, something we need to evaluate is how do we change those markets? How do we become more flexible and become better stewards of the supply chain?
Well, you raise or pose a very good question. So how do we do that? Answer that question.
It's really driven through relationships, technology, and creating flexibility and changing the way that we do things today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Reliable capacity then clearly is something that we're seeking, and we need to secure that. We need to have that both in the peak times and in normal times. So how do we arrive there?
Relationships is always one. This continues to be a relationship-driven business. It's not going to change with technology or anything that comes with that. Mm-hmm. The next is being a good steward as a shipper. You need to be easy to work with, easy to schedule appointments, load, unload, really be mindful of the carriers and the partners that you work with and treat them as partners, not just vendors.
Well, is that the answer to the question that you raised earlier? You said that people are just not talking to one another. So clearly we need to have that relationship, but we need to have the means, the technology for making that kind of communication. Would that be fair to say?
Very much so. I'd say it's physical communication as well as digital communication, and the flow of data is really what I think is the biggest lack of connectivity between the groups. People have relationships, but they don't share data with each other. They're not integrated to each other, and that's what's driving a lot of that inefficiency.
When we have that, that is going to allow us to scale up and down. Would that be correct to say?
Absolutely.
The technologies then and the strategies more specifically that need to be deployed. Let's walk through those if we're going to reduce these inefficiencies that we've been talking about. So what would they be?
First off is TMSs, right? You can't execute transactions without a TMS. Next is freight visibility platforms that are going to give us insight into where trucks are at, how they're moving. Appointment and dock scheduling. One of the biggest problems in our industry is how do I schedule an appointment and how do I get my trucks there? When are they going to go in? When are they going to go out? And really lastly, it's creating marketplaces that allow that to connect to each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the big issues, of course, is dwell times. And this is something that clearly needs to be reduced. We need to work there. A lot of work to be done there. How do we go about doing that? How do we get that desired reduction?
Yeah, there's some really, really cool innovations in our space. You've got companies like Baton. You've got a lot of these drop and hook trailer programs that are allowing shippers who do not have physical space to be able to take advantage of the drop and hook systems. And I think that's really the biggest change and driver in those types of environments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, we've been talking about the transportation providers, but let's talk about the shippers themselves. A shipper of choice, for instance, what makes one a shipper of choice?
Yeah, by its definition, a shipper of choice is someone that a carrier wants to work with at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be tender lead times. You're going to have easy to schedule appointments, good payment terms, and ultimately connectivity to those providers.
Well, let me ask you this. Is that a rarity in the business?
It is and it is not. I'd say the shippers of choice are there. There's a lot of room for improvement across the industry.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I want to, there may be some folks who are watching our video today who are not entirely familiar with Emerge. So I want to ask you, give us an idea of just what it is that you do, and then what is it that you are doing to optimize those operations of your customers? What do you say?
Yeah, Emerge is reinventing freight procurement. We offer RFP and spot procurement platforms to shippers to allow them to procure freight more efficiently in the way that we see the world evolving today. Really, really excited about all the opportunities to change that and create efficiencies in that process. You know, the annual events are really starting to deteriorate, and we're seeing a massive evolution into mini bids and a much shorter bid cycle on the over-the-road side.
All right, excellent. Great drill down into a vital part of our transportation network in this country here. Thank you so very much for sitting down and speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's Kyle Jepson, Emerge, speaking with us today about volatility in transportation capacity. Thanks for watching.